Welcome to the Frictionless Innkeeper Podcast. Coming right up, fresh tips and insights from lodging professionals aimed at helping you improve your business. Our podcast is brought to you by the Frictionless Guest app, the digital concierge that helps your guests to live like locals. Learn how at frictionlessguest.com. Steve Short, how are you?
Matt Lang, and I'm doing all right.
Excellent. Well, it's great to be connected, and it's great to have a new podcast. And we have not spoken with innkeepers in quite a while. And this one is with Doug Bagnasco and Jim DeBlasi, who are the owners of the Devonfield Inn in Lee, Massachusetts.
Yes, it's an 11-room inn, and it also, a significant thing is that they've got like 36 acres. So their story and where we kind of went with this podcast was really based upon COVID and having them focus on doing things that were really guest experience based on their property, as well as partnering with the local folks in the area off property. And of course, we're all up in that, that's what we're all about at Frictionless. So some fantastic ideas. I mean, they get it, they get that guest experience thing, and they went through a myriad of all the different things that they set up and help their guests with as far as experience stuff. So chock full of good information.
Yeah, it really was chock full of good information. It was, in many ways, they outlined a playbook for really how to enhance the guest experience. And I believe we'll probably be developing some follow-on content based on their awesome insight as well. So it was really good. So with that in mind, we hope you enjoy this Frictionless Innkeeper podcast interview with Doug and Jim from the Devonfield Inn. And Doug, Jim, and Steve, how y'all doing today?
Great. Excellent. Thanks.
Excellent. Steve Short, how are you, my friend?
Matt Langen, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. No, thanks a lot. Doug and Jim, thanks a lot for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah. And Doug and Jim would love to hear about the Devonfield Inn and how you all became innkeepers. We'll kick it off at that.
I think that starts out as my fault. I worked for Showtime Networks for about 18 years. And back in about 2016, they were offering packages with, a product that was too good to pass up. So I took the package, and we spent the next 6 months sort of exploring other options in the marketing and entertainment field. And I said to Doug, I don't think it's going to happen. There was a lot of dealings with millennials or just not the right opportunity coming up. So we decided to pursue Plan B. Plan B was based on some of our passions, and the innkeeping came at the top of the list. So we started to pursue it. And the more we pursued it, the better Plan B seemed than Plan A.
What sort of brought us along that path too is I had a background in innkeeping in my earlier years, and then took a 20-year hiatus and went into finance, whereas Jim had a marketing background his whole adult life and had a strong love of both baking and landscaping. So the combination of what we both brought to the table just seemed to make sense.
How long have you been doing this crazy gig?
So we've been actively operating the Devonfield Inn now for 5 years as of April 30th.
Wow.
Yeah. And the selection process was kind of interesting because I never thought Jim would actually take the plunge. So I gave him all the websites where the properties were listed, and he came back a week later with 80 properties listed on it. We put some filters on it and some parameters around what we wanted and nailed it down to 20, took them into 2 separate rooms and rated them A, Bs, and Cs. And Jim's A's were the most beautiful properties, and my A's were the most financially viable. And when we overlaid them, there were only 2 left on the A list, and that's how we got here.
And did you flip a coin for those last 2?
No, we visited the first one, which was the Devonfield Inn, and everything after that just sort of faded.
Hailed by powers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that was it, huh? Love at
Yeah, it
first
was
sight.
kind of love at first sight.
Right. That's cool. That is awesome. So 5 years ago, let's see. And then I guess within 2 years, we had something called COVID, I believe. Is that right?
Something like that.
Yeah. It was March of 2020 when, we were seeing and hearing more and more about it. So we had already had 2 full years under our belt. which I'm very thankful for at that time. And then it was the end of March. We were forced to shut down for about a 2.5 month period. Initially, we were told we could open early May, then late May, then early June. It just kept getting extended. So the scariest part was sort of not knowing when we'd be able to reopen our doors. But in fact, early June is when we did.
And that was fortunate because we were closed during the quietest seasons of our time. So if we had to be shut down, that was the perfect time to be shut down.
Okay. And you all are in Lee, Mass, right? Lee, Mass.
That's right. Yeah, up in the Berkshires. And so, one of the things that we did during that downtime is we really said, okay, so when we are able to open the doors, what do we want? What do we want the inn to look like from a safety standpoint to keep our guests, employees, and ourselves safe? And we spent a lot of time focusing on developing safety protocols before the state even sort of rolled out what they thought we should do, so that we were kind of a step ahead of the curve, with the idea being that if there was anything we missed, we could always just layer it in. And when the actual regulations came out of what the requirements would be, we found we had already kind of laid the groundwork already. So we were ready to roll and communicate that to our guests.
And I believe you got some help in terms of kind of knowing, or maybe some assistance. Was it with Acorn that basically said, hey, we surveyed all these travelers or whatever, and here's the kind of stuff that we suggest you do to prepare for this, the whole COVID thing?
It was terrific. They were a great expert in the field. They were conducting seminars, web seminars every week on different topics on how to deal with safety protocols, how to deal with guests. And it made a huge difference in terms of moving forward and being successful.
It was funny because a lot of what they had surveyed was in regards to how important it was to communicate what safety protocols were, and then sort of brainstorming safety protocols. But the most interesting aspect of it is when guests came later that year and even years that followed, one of the comments that the guests would say to us is that one of the reasons they chose the Devonfield was because we outlined our safety protocols in a very clear and concise manner, and it made them feel safer to come to us.
Acorn came up with a campaign that they were, advertising, which was stay small, stay safe, stay in.
INN.
And really what happened, and we found it to be true, guests were much more comfortable coming to a 10, 12 room inn than a 200-300 room hotel. They just felt the opportunity to keep it cleaner and safer was a lot greater.
Yeah, that's definitely what we've heard as well. And one of the interesting things you all really did beyond just the communication and making sure that you had all of the protocols in place to make people feel comfortable coming to you. Another big thing that you did was you leveraged what you have there, and you really kind of became this sort of microcosm, if you want to call it, or encapsulated property where people could come and pretty much do whatever they wanted on your property without having to necessarily go beyond. Is that right? And that's something that maybe you had before, but you didn't, I guess, stress it or focus on it as much. Is that right?
Yeah, we're blessed with 36 acres of land here on the property. And when COVID hit, we realized that one of the things that we were sure guests would want would be the opportunity to do more things outdoors. And we said, well, how can we leverage what our property offers to help facilitate that? And we came up with a number of different ideas.
A lot of it had to do with the things that were associated with the Berkshires that were shut down. Particularly Tanglewood Music Festival. That's a great draw throughout the summer season, and they shut down entirely. So one of the things that we thought about doing was doing lawn concerts. So we were offering free lawn concerts that included our guests as well as a certain number of people within the community. And we were focused on local musicians coming in every week and performing.
We worked on social distancing and capacity requirements that were in compliance with the state. So we would not let the count go over 50. Everyone had to pre-register at that time. We had designated spots for everyone to sit at, so there was plenty of social distancing, even outdoors, so that everyone would be safe during those scary times.
Yeah.
The other thing that was another outdoor activity that we did is, for Palo is a world-renowned yoga center here in the Berkshires, and they closed that summer as well, 2020. And so what we did is we got in touch with a couple of the Propello yoga instructors and started offering private yoga on the lawn out in our backyard area. And that was very well received. And we've continued to do that today as well.
That's cool. We're definitely all about the guest experience thing. So what are some of the other things? Like, I believe when we talked a little while back that you cut some trails maybe, so people could do some hiking on your property and that sort of thing, right?
That's right. So while Jim was on the phone and on webinars with Acorn, soaking up as much information as we could, I was out blazing trails. But it was great for my sanity.
Leave it to the marketing guy to do, all the easy work, right? I mean,
Someone's got to do it.
Someone's got to do it. That's true.
Yeah, I'm a city boy, so it was kind of an interesting experience for me being out in the woods and blazing trails and tying ribbons around trees. So I knew.
Find your way out.
Tie a line to him, right? So make sure he can get back. And you also, you had mentioned before that, there was kayaking and other stuff, right? So the stuff offsite as well that was outdoors as opposed to, let's say, restaurants, maybe, I don't know. But all that outdoor stuff that people are drawn to anyway. Do you have kind of partners or work in conjunction with those local places that, that offer that and you kind of set things up for your guests, that sort of thing?
Yes, we did a number of things. We said to ourselves, knowing that there's going to be more of a focus on outdoor activities, we take for granted what's available in the area, but many guests aren't sure what there is to do or who to call. And so we decided we were going to help connect the dots. So we put together a lot of different packages with vendors, everything from horseback riding to guided kayaking on the Housatonic River, guided hikes on a variety of trails, hot air ballooning, whitewater rafting, zip lining. And then we also threw in winter activities too. So in the wintertime, offering things like where to go, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, ice skating, downhill skiing, snow tubing, try to create a lot of options for guests that want to get out there and do outdoor things. We also threw out some videos that covered these topics as well and sort of made some fun videos promoting those sort of things.
And one of the things that we found were a lot of people going stir crazy, and they definitely wanted to get out and to explore and do things. And having all these outdoor activities created that sense of safety and comfort for them. So it was a welcome addition to aspects of what we provided.
There's also local wineries. So we put together sort of winery tours with some local wineries and have created some really good relationships with them.
I always wondered, are wineries open in the wintertime? Can you tour them in the wintertime or are they kind of shut down?
Yeah, there's a few that are, but more so because they're a mix. Like there's a place that called Hilltop Orchards that, because they also have apple orchards and have a working fireplace and this big wine tasting room, they're open year round. Some of the others, not so much.
Cool. Excellent. And so you put together packages that, was anything special going on? Like, hey, if you stay with us and we've got these packages where they're going to kind of treat you like a VIP sort of thing as opposed, or maybe it's a little bit less, but you get the special treatment, that sort of thing.
Sure. We actually created a scenario where they can book the room as well as the activities at the same time. In addition to that, we've put together some packages where dinner or $100 voucher towards a restaurant is included. So we offer breakfast, but not dinner. So, and that way we're able to bring our guests to specific restaurants that we know they're going to love. And the restaurants love that too, because they know that we're supporting their business, which of course, restaurants in particular had such a difficult go of it during COVID.
That is awesome. You all are like the poster children for our perspective on partnerships and the whole local thing and tying it all together with what you offer to your guests. I think it's awesome. There were a couple other things. Maybe you had mentioned, I think there was a working dairy farm or something. Is that right that you've got?
Yeah, High Lawn Farms is a working dairy farm where you can go in and pet the baby calves. But more importantly, they have the best ice cream in the Berkshires. So one of the things that Doug did is he created what he calls the Doug Circle Tour. And it basically talks about the surrounding areas and all the highlights within there to go. And it literally is taking people in a circle, but it includes a chocolate factory, the dairy farm, and some hiking trails.
My favorite paint store, my favorite antique store. The idea is it gets them into each of the individual towns. My favorite overlook, and see actually plenty of car. You don't even have to do the hiking if you don't want to.
Excellent. That is fantastic. And then also, I guess another thing that you leverage, and maybe talk about, it seems like your perspective is a good one in terms of what you might suggest to others, where you basically had said that you have to leverage what you have, right? I mean, leverage what you have. You have to be true to what you want to do and what your property can provide. Maybe talk a little bit about that, and then also it'd be good to talk about weddings a little bit, because I think that's another focus to a degree, I guess, of what you do, right?
I think one of the things is everybody has to look at that property as individual pieces of land. Everything is not going to work for every person. For us, it just happened to be beneficial that we're on 36 acres. So it gave us the opportunity to use a lot of the outdoors for different activities and such, including weddings. We were doing local and elopements, maybe one a month or so, right? Would you say? And then when 2020 came, all the big wedding venues shut down, and we had all these couples that were still looking to, tie the knot, and they figured they would do their big party or reception at a future date. And we started doing sometimes 3, 4, or 5 weddings a weekend.
I think I'm pretty close to became an ordained minister, and I think I'm pretty close to having married about 100 couples. And it's something that I become passionate about, that I really enjoy doing. I remember as a young boy being at a couple of weddings and listening to the person that was performing the ceremony just sort of talk very monotone and unemotional. And we're like, my God, it's this couple's most important day of their life. Can't you be excited about it? And so I kind of use that as a mantra to when I'm doing the ceremonies, to just try and make them as incredible experience as possible.
I have to tell him to calm down half the time.
Well, that's good. It's better. Yeah, it's better than the other way around. I guess
Absolutely.
Maybe if you do too many of them, I guess you just lose your charm or your desire to be nice to everybody or to be happy along with everybody else that's there for the ceremony. I don't know.
Well, it's a great mix to be in, because generally speaking, with smaller weddings and elopements, you're usually dealing with a lot less stressed out bridal parties and brides and grooms and mother-in-laws and such. So it's usually a very fun experience for everyone.
And you will most of the stuff you do is just the ceremony, as opposed to like the entire, the wedding party converges on the property, right? I think you'll allow for that, but that doesn't happen too often. Is that right?
That's right. We have a great facilities for an outdoor ceremony, up to even as many as 100 people, though typically 50 or less. But when you bring it indoors, the count has to reduce. Yeah, our common areas just don't have a large space for 50 or 100 people. So we'll often say if the weather's inclement, you have to be prepared to have a tent out there. But if it's a small enough gathering of 20, 25 or less, we do have some indoor options then as well. As far as the actual dinner reception or wedding reception, we promote off-site locations. We promote off-site locations because they're better equipped. We are not a full-service restaurant property, so we do breakfast, but we'd rather have them do it off-site. But if they prefer to have it on-site and it's a small enough gathering, they can rent a tent and get some caterers in, and we're happy to accommodate that as well.
Yeah, interesting. Cool. So suggestions maybe to other innkeepers. I mean, I think just what you've gone over in terms of the ideas. I mean, Matt, we're going to have to do a separate little write-up. We'll have to do a blog post with some of this stuff, because it's so rich with a lot of really good ideas in terms of partnering and suggested activities and that sort of thing. Yeah. But any more thoughts on how you well, I mean, the pivot because of COVID is, had to happen, but you've basically kept this whole approach, right? And if there are property owners out there now who haven't done a whole lot of the partnering and the offsites or even that on-site, trying to provide more things on site as well, what would your suggestions be if they feel like, okay, we need to do more about that?
So from my perspective, I'd say there's three things to look at is one, what are the assets of your property, as Jim mentioned before? What are the attributes? What are the things that you can use to your advantage? Two is, what are you passionate about? Because doing something just because you can that you're not going to enjoy doing, you're not going to enjoy hosting and being a part of, just going to get tired and boring for you, or it's not going to go over as well as something you're truly passionate about. And then the third thing is really understanding what your guests want. And by guests, I mean the guests that currently stay with you, but also potential guests that are out there that are untapped. Understand who they are, what they're looking for, and never assume. The worst thing I think anyone can do is say, oh, I think our guests are going to love something, not talk to anyone about it, not get their feedback and just roll it out there. But I believe the closer you are with the guests in daily interactions and really knowing them well and talking to them about ideas that you have versus just rolling them out offhand, I think those are effective ways to really make a difference.
And I think it comes down to also being creative, think outside the box, whether it means finding unique places where you could, offer a little breakfast, or how you're offering breakfast, or the menus that you're offering. We do something on the weekends, a wine and cheese reception, and we bring in live piano music. So it's taking advantage, thinking outside the box, and being willing to try things and not doing things just because it's the way it's been done.
The other side of that is you can have a cool idea, but is it cool just to you, or is it cool to the guests too? Because it's all about the guest experience, really. That's what matters most.
Yeah. It's one of those strange things. I remember one of my favorite marketing classes, and it was about product development, which, service development, it doesn't matter whether it's service or product, but it was kind of this paradigm of, sometimes you have to have the ideas in order to bring people to them because no one's thought of it before, or, but then again, you also have to kind of test your idea or know what your market wants as well, because a great idea to you, like you said, might not mean anything to everybody else. So it's a great point. Okay. Matt, how are we doing?
I think we're doing all right. Should we go to our lightning round questions? Are we ready for that?
Our innkeeper lightning round.
Yeah.
Although we don't want to rush them through the lightning round, right? We have plenty of time, guys. So.
Oh yeah, we have nothing but time. Yeah.
Okay.
If there's anything. Yeah. Before we do that, actually, is there anything we may have missed? I know we've covered off on a lot of good stuff. And Steve, I do love your idea about kind of reemerging the tips article series that we've been doing in the past based on what we've learned today.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff there. But yeah, anything else any wisdom you'd like to impart before we get into the questions, the innkeeper questions?
No, I don't think there is, other than know your guest, know what they want, and look really hard at what guests are out there that you haven't tapped into, what demographics, what market. I think, there's a big opportunity out there right now to attract much more of a younger group of bed and breakfast guests. I think traditionally it's always been considered a 40s or 50s and up group, but I think that's no longer true. Maybe it was never true, and maybe it was just that we didn't know how to market to them in the past, but it's all experiential. And I think a lot of the changes that are happening in the industry as a result of COVID is going to help most of the businesses out there offer a more experiential type of, enhance the stay through experiential type of packages and stuff. I think that, what happened in 2020 and beyond is really going to help the industry as a whole become more geared towards more demographic areas, people.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. All right, Matt, have at it with the questions.
All right. Sounds good. So for all of our listeners, it's been a while since we've done this. So this is what we call informally our lightning round questions. But it's 3 questions here, basically to get a sense of the definition of guest experience and also just get a sense of the shift of demographic. So I'll throw this out. The first question here to Doug and Jim. So how do you define guest experience? How important is it to your B&B, and what strategy/tactics do you use to address it and improve it?
If I were to use one simple phrase, it would be hands-on. I think that is probably one of the most important aspects of innkeeping. Many of the guests that come really want to get to know the innkeepers. You have occasionally some that really could care less, and that's fine. But I think one of the biggest surprises for Jim and I 5 years ago were to realize how many of the guests that come want to really interact with us, want to hear our story, why we chose the Devonfield, why we even chose to be B&B owners. They also love at breakfast hearing what's on the menu and interacting with us at that point.
And interacting with the other guests too.
Yes.
I think there's a certain expectation of when people come to a B&B versus a hotel. And it's more of the intimate kind of experience. And as Doug said, it's that getting to know, interacting with the innkeepers. That was a huge surprise. And when people ask them, like, how did you get here? And, hearing about other times and other experiences where they've been at B&Bs where the owners were never around, where it was sort of just a total investment kind of opportunity versus, a hands-on, let's get to know you experience.
From a guest experience standpoint, that's probably the most critical thing. I think you can have a manager run the place for you. And I think if you've got the right person in place, I think they can do a fantastic job. But our experience has been that guests just love meeting the innkeepers and getting to know them.
Yeah, it's interesting because you got on the one extreme, you've got the short-term rental Airbnb kind of thing, which is what you're describing as like, there's no interaction with whoever owns the place or whatever manages, whatever you want to call it. And then on the other extreme, you've got innkeepers more like you all that are there, ever present and interacting. And I guess there's a whole spectrum in between that as far as what I guess the type of innkeeper a person is, right? How much they want to interact. But yeah, that's what you've described is more of, my wife and I are huge bed and breakfast people. So we've always wanted to kind of interact and talk to the people that were staying there or the innkeepers, and always, of course, we're huge history and architectural history buffs. So we always want to know about the place where we're staying and ask a lot about that. So cool. Good. All right. Question number 2, Matt.
Okay. Question number 2. If you can get an hour of time with a leading expert/consultant in the B&B industry, what are the 2 or 3 most important questions you would like to ask them?
I think one of the things would be with, you just mentioned Airbnb, how that's going to continue to affect and expectations of what it's going to do to the B&B industry.
Interesting.
For me, one of the things that I really would like to get a better pulse on is the industry trends going forward over the next 5 to 10 years. Where do we see more and more guests coming from demographically, regionally? How do we see international travel changing as COVID becomes hopefully something more and more in the rearview mirror, and sort of forecasting forward from everything from occupancy standpoints and pricing standpoints, really having a better understanding of the direction all that's going, because we've seen in the last couple of years in the B&B industry in particular, sort of a surge in guest stays. And part of it, I think, is the result of people traveling regionally versus nationally in some cases and internationally in many cases. But there's also the aspect of people that have been sort of somewhat avoiding larger hotels and going in the B&B direction. Where's that headed down the road? How does that, are we in a bubble that then starts to sort of contract a little bit, or are we seeing something that's going to be more permanent? That's something that always is on my mind.
Yeah, it's good questions. Cool. And let's see. Matt, Don Pardo, question number 3, Don Pardo.
Question number 3 and our final question.
I'm dating myself by saying that, but you all laughed, Doug and Jim, right?
Yeah, we're all dating ourselves.
We get it.
All right, perfect. I'll try my best Don Pardo impression here. So what is the percentage mix of guests that stay at your B&B based upon the following three age groups? And how are those percentages trending? So these three age groups are under 40, between 40 and 60 years of age. And then the last one is over 60.
So I would treat the answer in two ways. I think there's two different seasons I would talk about. I would talk about Tanglewood season.
Right.
The Tanglewood season, which is July and August, we have an older crowd in general. I would say over 60, you're probably looking at 70%, 40 to 60. Would you disagree with that? 60%. Okay. And then 40 to 60, maybe 20%, and then another 20% for under. Yeah, that would be the summer season. And it's mostly driven by, Tanglewood and a strong repeat guest that we have for that period. What we've seen happening more and more and more, both pre-COVID, but even more so during COVID, is a growth of the millennial age group. And really, I'd say anyone under 40. We've seen, from the 20s, 30s, 40s, much, much more to the point that our regular guests will say to us, oh my God, it's so nice to see younger people here. And I would say in the off season, it's more like maybe 40% under 40. So we're still a large part of that base is 40 plus, but a much bigger base now.
And what we're finding with the under 40, with the millennials, it's really a first time experience. One of the funny stories was about a year and a half or so ago. There was a young couple and we're taking them through the inn, giving them a tour. And as we're walking them to the room, the young woman looks at me and says like, this is really cool. It's like I'm staying in your house. I said, you are staying in my house, but they get a kick out of it. And I think for a lot of them, it's a very different experience than what they anticipated.
You have to say that if you're looking at, what, in my opinion, drives more of that under 40 age group, I would say that the things that for us made a difference was when we first got here, we completely revamped our website. We had industry photographers help us and come out and do shoots. The website was very dated when we first got here and immediately was much, much better and had a big impact. Add to that guest reviews, and being hands-on really generates a lot more guest reviews than when you're not hands-on. And as our guest reviews grew and grew and grew, I think everything's from the online booking capabilities to the website, to the photography, to the ability to see and read about these experiential happenings at the end drew in that younger crowd. And I think it's been critical to growing that segment.
Yeah, it makes sense that all the experience stuff that you do is going to end up with better reviews and it all just feeds off itself, right?
Yeah. And I think the under 40 crowd, they read that and they say, hey, that sounds really interesting. I've never stayed at the B&B before, but this really sounds like a cool experience. Let's go check it out.
Yeah. And I mean, everything we hear is that they want the real experience, which it's kind of ironic that they haven't really done the B&B thing because like the story, wow, it's like I'm in your house, it's like, well, that was the original idea that started back in like the 70s, maybe even before that. Right. I mean, this was the whole thing. You were staying at real people's houses and they just happened to make breakfast for you in the morning to get you going wherever you were going. Right. So yeah, that's kind of amusing. So good deal. Matt, you going to lead us out of here?
I'll get you out of trouble and lead us out. But Doug and Jim, any parting shots here before I do my little outro?
I would just add for anyone out there listening, just, as you look at your inn, just focus on what are you passionate about and what are your guests passionate about?
And listen to your guests. They'll give you the information that you need as long as you don't ignore it.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, that's a great way to conclude this Frictionless Innkeeper podcast interview with Doug Bagnasco and Jim DeBlasi, who are the owners of the Devonfield Inn in Lee, Massachusetts. And both of these gentlemen were kind enough to discuss their on-property experiential amenities that they developed during COVID-19, but really still live on today. And they also shared some awesome insights into really how to enhance the guest experience. And our podcast is brought to you by the Frictionless Guest app, which is the digital concierge that helps your guests to live like locals. Learn more at frictionlessguest.com. Once again, that's frictionlessguest.com. Doug, Jim, and Steve, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, guys. Yep. Thanks for the time.